Thank you so very much for coming. We're going to start unfashionably, absolutely bang on time. So hopefully not too many people will come wandering in. But even if they do, we'll be so transfixed on what Yosef has to say, we won't mind. So we are delighted on so many levels that this event is taking place today. Many of you are here from Vancouver, from Simon Fraser University. Many of you are here from Wolfson College, Oxford, not quite such a commute, but we're equally pleased to see you in here too. This has been the culmination of the best part of a decade's worth of work, negotiation, dreaming, etc., etc., etc. And so the fact that we have our wonderful master's students from Vancouver with us is a huge cause for celebration for us. But more than that, we have the wonderful Yosef Wosk, who is a visiting scholar with us, also from Vancouver, who is the driving force behind our historic, really, collaboration between Simon Fraser University and the Oxford Centre for Life Writing. Without him, absolutely none of many things would be possible. Right now is all about him. Later, the dinner will be a celebration of his new book, but it will also be a celebration of our collaboration. So for those of us joining us later, I will go into perhaps a little more detail then. But now I want to focus on Yosef, because today is all about New Life Joke Shop, his brand new book. And it's wonderful serendipitous timing that this has come out and is being launched while the SFU students are here. Now, it's rarely been harder to introduce a writer here at the Life Writing Centre. We've introduced many a writer with many a varied and illustrious career, but there are very few things that Yosef hasn't done or achieved or received many accolades for. He's that rare creature, a truly interdisciplinary scholar, a Renaissance man, if you like. And he's played a major role in the intellectual community at Simon Fraser University as a fellow, as Adjunct Professor in the Department of Humanities and the Director of Interdisciplinary Programmes and Continuing Studies. He founded the Canadian Academy of Independent Scholars, and few come more independent than he does, I think. He's an art collector, a philanthropist, an author of multiple works of life writing for which he's won non-fiction prizes and awards for social awareness. We've been hugely privileged to have him here with us as a visiting scholar and a part of our community over the summer. But unfortunately for us, he is too all-embracing to stay put in our little corner of North Oxford. He's been all over Europe all summer, and he's just this minute really come back from Africa. And this traveling, constantly curious, constantly wondering at the world is what drives his latest book. Yosef manages to combine the travels and observations of at least 10 lives into one volume. It's poignant, it's witty, hugely thought-provoking, reflecting on a life lived richly and on the future. The blend of travel and reflection brings us with him as he takes us on an odyssey, drawing on his past and on the Bible, on philosophers and on his own encounters, to think about the very largest of life's questions. What's it all about? Where are we going? How do we think about aging and the passing of time? What's our place in the world as a species? All told, with those of us who have the pleasure of knowing him, will recognise as his deeply authentic blend of humanity, humility, and humour. So Yosef, thank you very much indeed. And just to add that there are 3 signed copies of this and his other works at the back. Please don't injure each other in the crush. There are at least 30, so no elbowing, scratching or biting. But Yosef, thank you very, very much indeed. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Kate. President Sir Tim Hitchens, thank you for joining us this evening. Dr. Hugh David, members of the Oxford Centre for Life Writing, Professor Sasha Kolbo, and your students, from all grad students from Simon Fraser University in the GLS program. I consider one of the very best, not just at SFU, but in all of Canada. Fred and Barbara, who have been traveling in England and are good friends from Vancouver. And Alan and Tara are not here yet, but they'll be joining us as a surprise. Alan is my good friend and editor. He's well known to Sasha and SFU, has helped with. He was just inaugurated into the Order of British Columbia, and is widely considered the BC's, British Columbia's leading man of letters. So it was an honor that they were able to fly out. I just got a note under my door at Linton Lodge that they've arrived and they should be here soon. Also, I'd like to recognize one of the new grad students here, Marcel Shelton, who's sitting back here. And Marcel's parents, Anthony and Nikki, they're both professors. I believe they're retired now, but probably emeritus at UBC. And his father, Anthony Shelton, was director of Museum of Anthropology for over 20 years. Museum of Anthropology, or MOA, as it's often known, has collaborated on some wonderful projects over the decades with Pitt Rivers Museum here at Oxford. And Nikki, your mother, is my favorite curator, hands down. Just you're in her presence, and the world just not just lights up, but it's a flame. So I hope, even though your parents have retired or semi-retired, that we can still collaborate together. One of the rabbis in the Talmud, about 2,000 years ago, commented about what he had learned. He said, if all the heavens were parchment, all the seas ink, if all the trees were quills, it would still not be enough to record all that I have learned from my masters. And I have learned only as much as an insect that dips in the great ocean and absorbs the smallest amount. I've spent a life in learning. I guess at first it was forced upon us. We've all been tamed and domesticated to be part of a family, a society. That there are Freud called it civilization and its discontents, that you have to give up a bit of your independence in order to live cooperatively with others. There are many benefits to it, but most of us are not aware of the rebellion, the discontent that lives just under the surface, the number of compromises that we have to make in order to live in society. And there are, sometimes we call them criminals, sometimes we call them mad or discontents, protesters, whatever it is, who wake up or are compelled to act, to react in a certain way. I've tried in my life over the years, and it's been a slow revelation to see the true nature of life. It took decades to learn to think for myself. And a lot of that just came in the last 20, 25 years. Before that, it was either the right answer or the wrong answer. You do this or you don't, or you do that and you get reward or punished or admired or cursed. But to have my own thought, as opposed to, that's interesting. Oh, you're right. And then a third person would give it in the same conversation, another opinion and say, you're right too. And I would be the only one left out having my own opinion, whether I was embarrassed or not strong enough or a false humility. And it was only through a lifelong engagement of slowly learning how to speak, how to express, how to accept, that I discovered the joy, literally, of conversation, of expression, of supporting others and growing myself. As Kate mentioned, I just returned from a month traveling in Africa. We traveled to 7, 8 countries, and what I discovered quickly was that Africa is not a country. The farther away you are from a concept, you draw the big picture, you put it into limited parentheses. But when you get there, you atomize and you find out any one country, whether it's dates back millennia or hundreds of years or just tens of years post-colonial, it has its own history and its own identity. Everything I've discovered has an ego identity, not just the arrogation that we give to humanity. I, me, mine, and you, yours, the separation between us. That everything from the atom, atom, to the atom, which means in Hebrew, you are called Adam because you are taken from the earth. Adam literally means earthman, and Chava, or Eve, is the mother of all life. That's what those names mean. And all life, all existence has its own identity, its own passions, its desires, its drives, and the competition between them for our place in the universe. I wrote in one of the sections, it's a series of essays, about 20 of them. Some are just one sentence and some 2 or 3 pages. This short 3-paragraph on pilgrimage. Herman Melville from Moby Dick. It is not down on any map. True places never are. Our entire lives are a pilgrimage, a personal journey through the unfolding of a greater continuum. Whether here at home or on distant roads to seemingly impossible locations, there are even certain destinations that you can't get to by going anywhere. Pilgrimage remains a significant means towards understanding existence. Pilgrimage presents both a challenge and an opportunity. Those who are conscious of the meaning of their travels have a greater chance of achieving their goals. And yet one must also make room for getting lost and setting aside time for serendipitous assignations with unexpected phenomena. What may at first seem like an inconvenient detour often ends up defining the journey. If it is only the rational mind that controls the itinerary, then the physical traveler may achieve her goal, but the wandering soul will have been denied a greater adventure. Those goals may be all-encompassing knowledge or self-determination. They may involve the community at large or prove to be a singular search for the object of one's desire. Pilgrimage embraces physical, spiritual, emotional, and intellectual efforts. Accomplishments are achieved in the heart as much as the mind, and in time as much as space. Some pilgrims travel to give thanks, others to seek forgiveness, or to ask for healing, love, or power. Some wander in search of the other, many to know the self. All must travel very far to know that which was always near. Another chapter in the book was written, now it's 6 years ago, just before I turned 70. And I decided I was alone then, hoping to meet someone, get married again, on a romantic around the world voyage. I finally, after many attempts, realized I'm getting older before I find the perfect person. So I decided to start looking for around the world cruises. And I found one that was Holland America, a 4-month cruise, the North Hemisphere as much as the South, and East West, going through both canals. It seemed like the ideal trip. And on that trip, I was about to turn 70, just as we were entering from North Australia and through Indonesia and into the Indian Ocean. And I wrote at the end of that, here's about getting older, needing a magnifying glass through the small page numbers. So this was the day before turning 70, March 25th, 2019. 3 weeks have passed since I began writing reflections on the upcoming birthday milestone. I suppose I was experiencing some anxiety in finally accepting the 70, and so delayed completing my thoughts. Since then, we sailed to Darwin in Northern Australia and then to Komodo Island, Indonesia, to visit the mythical Komodo dragons. We continued through the unique Hindu enclave of Bali, followed by a pilgrimage to the great Buddhist temple of Borobudur, then on to Singapore, one of the great city-states in the world today, before passing through the Andaman Sea and into the Bay of Bengal. The warm waters of the Indian Ocean lay just ahead. It is where I will greet my threshold day of reckoning, the completion of 7 decades and into the 8th. March 26, 2019. After 70 years of uninterrupted labor, the day finally arrived. I recited Modeh, the short prayer of gratitude that greets each day, opened one eye and then the next, checked my still buoyant heart, took a deep breath and carried on. There remains so much more to know, to do, to be. Old men, I now realize, must still be explorers. I named the next chapter that title, taken from a T.S. Eliot poem. And this was based on some correspondence. Those from the Vancouver area would recognize with Michael Ledane, who I was very reticent out of respect to approach. Over time, we've become friends in many ways. The letter that I sent to him and his wife Yoshi, as they were actually flying from Vancouver and over the polar areas to London, it included the prayer poem, Sleep of Prisoners, by the English Quaker playwright Christopher Fry, originally written in 1951. It had been introduced to me in a series of workshops by one of my major teachers, Gene Houston. I'll just read parts of it. The human heart can go to the lengths of God. Dark and cold we may be, but this is no winter now. The frozen misery of centuries breaks, cracks, begins to move. The thunder is the thunder of the flows, the thaw, the flood, the upstart spring. Thank God our time is now when wrong comes up to face us everywhere, never to leave us till we take the longest stride of soul men ever took. Affairs are now soul size. The enterprise is exploration into God. Where are you making for? It takes so many thousand years to wake, but will you wake for pity's sake? Michael wrote back from the airplane, and he didn't sleep all night. They arrived in London the next morning, and he sent me the email response, to which I wrote back, but it took me almost a year. It was so much fear, respect, reaction. I wrote to him, I didn't realize that you had such a profound appreciation for poetry, in this case, Fry's A Sleep of Prisoners. You wrote, I read this prayer from A Sleep of Prisoners over and over in the early dawn until it became part of me. Yours, I wrote him, is not just a cursory appreciation or a guarded and distant intellectual understanding, but rather a wholehearted, numinous involvement in the experience. You don't just read poetry, you become the poem. That is how I felt in our garden the past few years. The poetry of garden, where each letter is a leaf, each image a flower, all plants a tree of life, a metaphysical flight of forever. I'll skip. I sent him a couple poems, and I say, the last is a poem with which I am sure you are familiar. T.S. Eliot, East Coker, number 2 from the 4 quartets. There is so much here that I would feel would resonate with you, but I'll restrain myself to quoting just a few lines. Hugh is not here right now, right?
Hugh is that.
Hugh, can you please come up and, not to embarrass you, but I'd like to make a presentation. This is something that we've spoken about starting a special collections and rare books library here at Wolfson, and I know you've spoken with the librarian, with Fiona. I've gone ahead and the quote from T.S. Eliot, we found an edition signed by Eliot. That's a 1960 Faber and Faber. You get the bag too. It's from the rare books and antiquarian from Blackwell's, with many of you familiar with that now, here right next to the Bodleian. And I'll read this from the original volume that I'd then like to present to you on behalf of Wolfson College for the first book. I know it's not official yet, but if we push it a bit. By the way, I'll just show you, because this is a treat. Here is the signature. Eliot held this very volume and signed it, and this will be the cornerstone of the new rare books and special collections here. Old men not to be explorers, here and there does not matter. We must be still and still moving into another intensity, for a further union, a deeper communion, through the dark, cold, and the empty desolation. The wave cry, the wind cry, the vast waters of the petrel and the porpoise. In my end is my beginning. Quick now, here now, always. A condition of complete simplicity, costing not less than everything. And all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well, when the tongues of flame are enfolded into the crowned knot of fire, and the fire and the rose are one.
Yosef, this is as much a delight as it is a surprise. Thank you very much on behalf of us all here at Wolfson. What a wonderful benefaction to start and way great things flourish in our special collections.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. How is our time?
10 minutes.
Okay,
15.
so related to this, I'll read a section, an essay on books, just part of it. It's with a magnificent photograph too, taken, some of you will have visited Paris Shakespeare and Company. Yes, it's just a wonderful photograph to illustrate this. And this is, there's another section I have here on libraries, but this is on the special edition, the well-designed book. A generic book could be simply described as a set of written, printed, or blank pages fastened along one edge and encased between protective covers. But the well-designed book, limited edition or rare book, is another species altogether, for it is also concerned with the quality, uniqueness, and aesthetic value of each volume. Not only are the words themselves important, but extra care is also paid to the book's edition, quality of content, design, printing, and provenance. It is not sufficient that words alone be legible. Additional dimensions are brought to bear, ones that appreciate with a sense of exquisite attention borne upon the winds of infinite patience, the potion of ink, the vintage of press, and the mill of paper. We lift the book to the light as well as to the shadow, to catch the glint upon the ink, as fresh today as it was 500 years ago. We notice the paper's thickness, its alluring texture, and its amorous receptivity to impression, as if making love with the mechanical printing press. Just as human hair is transformed with age to a crown of silver, so too a fine folio develops an ivory-colored coat, gracefully matured in the crucible of time. The fairest books are fastened with sewing skill and then draped with linens and leathers worthy of haute couture. Such great consideration is lavished upon the binding that even an accidental glance can result in a profound aesthetic experience that at once quickens the eye and captures the heart. Who can resist, as if by personal invitation, reaching out to raise the book, to know its weight and absorb its well-earned reputation? Fragrance, along with history, is inhaled in a swift osmotic migration from the master's depths to the bibliophile's longing for completion. The most magnificent books achieve that rare combination of outer vision with inner content. It is something that we in our complex psycho-spiritual unfolding spend a lifetime growing towards. Contrary to popular proverb, when happening upon such publications, one could very well judge a book by its cover. Design is not just an afterthought or a minor detail. It is not an inconvenience nor a stumbling block. Design is wings and wonder. It is a reliquary, an appropriate vessel, grand or humble, heavy or thin, for all those who would be embraced by its protective aesthetics. The slimmest volume, attired in time and texture, in exquisitely composed space and perfect typeface, is a parenthetical reiteration of creation itself. Since we cannot achieve perfection in ourselves, we can at least attempt it in our works. When we gaze upon this fine book or that bold building, when we hear music that animates the soul, when we garb our bodies in impeccable textiles designed by a master tailor, or taste a sublime recipe that closes the eyes and awakens the flavors of Eden, these works serve as a mentoring mirror to arouse us once again to the highest calling of the possible human. There are times, however, when the morals, the ethics, the reality behind the aesthetics are more important. And then I go on to quote a story that I first read decades ago in the great book, the compilation by Paul Reps of Zen stories called Zen Flesh, Zen Bones. And there he tells the story of the 17th century Japanese Zen master Tetsugen as he attempted to print the Buddhist sutras newly translated from the Chinese. The books were to be printed with carved wood blocks in an edition of 7,000 copies, an enormous undertaking. To cover expenses, he walked through the countryside for years. Some people gave a penny, some as much as they could, and he thanked each one equally. After many years, he had saved enough money and commissioned the carving of the blocks. At that time, however, the Uji River overflowed, famine followed, so he took the funds that he had collected and distributed to the people. Now there was nothing left for the sutras. Years had passed, but he didn't give up. Once again, he walked for years through the countryside and collected, and people gave a penny, a dollar, whatever they could. After many years, he had collected enough and was ready now to print the sutras. And once again, tragedy struck. An epidemic like we just went through the last few years, and there was emergency throughout the country. He took everything and gave it to the poor. For the third time, he went out and collected. A few years later, finally, he was ready to print, and this time no tragedy. And we're told that those same wooden blocks that were used to print the sutras can still be found in the Obaku Monastery in Kyoto. But over the monastery, as you enter the gate, there's a short statement in which it says, "This is where Tetsugen printed the sutras, but dear children, the first two versions were better than the third." My life as a spy. This book is all over the map. From serious to iconoclastic to humor, intellect, the emotions, things I went through, the esoteric literature, the thoughts about technology and innovation. This first piece, my life as a spy. Yes, it's a provocative title, but it really did happen. When I was a student, so I was in my probably in my mid-20s in New York at Yeshiva University, and millions of Jewish people were held in the Soviet Union who wanted to get out. This is in the late 60s through the mid 1970s, and they were refused immigration. And so the title that was given to them were the refuseniks. At least that's the title here in the West. There were different ways of keeping in touch with them. One was sending emissaries to speak with them, just to encourage them, to tell them you are not forgotten. So my learning partner, that's what in learning the Talmud, it's not just a solitary expression, and you're not just up against others, but it's a communal learning experience. And you usually are paired with someone. It's from the Hebrew and Aramaic word chaver, means friend, and chavruta is your learning partner. So we both applied. We thought it would be both to help our people, but also a great adventure, as at that age, that's exactly what you think. We were interviewed in the yeshiva, in the seminary, and accepted. And but then we were told, now you have to meet your handler. We had no idea who was sponsoring us. But we were given directions, take the A train. I write all about this in here, but I had to reconstruct what I could remember. Out to Brooklyn, to Coney Island, and we were told who to meet on probably like a Tuesday morning at a nondescript motel on the side of near Brighton Beach. And we go in, and there's no one there to greet us. So we thought, did we get the wrong day, the wrong time? Was this a test of some sort? And we didn't go up to the reception and ask if this person was there, because then who knows, you're giving away his cover. So we waited and waited. After about 10 minutes, we realized we better take a chance. Which we did, and before we even finished, after we mentioned his name, the fellow receptionist says, down the hall to your right. So we go down there, knock on the door. After a minute, the fellow comes and he says, "You're late." Said, "But we didn't want to give your name. We thought it would compromise the mission." He said, if I can't trust you here, how can I trust you overseas? So we were very humbled and contrite. And after speaking to us for about 10 minutes, he finally decided to open up. We had already gone through the other testing. And then he saw we were relatively responsible. And then he gave us a list of names, addresses, and phone numbers in a number of cities, in Moscow, Tashkent, it was in Uzbekistan, etc. About 5 or 6 cities. I had read a few years ago in Life magazine, or a few years before this, and I remember the pictures. It was actually Richard Nixon, of blessed memory, who, when he was vice president, he was actually very good in foreign affairs, and as part of American diplomacy, he was sent to the Soviet Union at the time. One of the places he visited was Samarkand, and I remember the beautiful pictures of the of the tiles, the Islamic tiles on the schools and mosques, all blues and with the calligraphy on it. And I just fell in love with this magical place. So among the half dozen places where we were sent, I dared to speak up and said, is it possible that we could go to Samarkand? At first he said no, and it's like, what are you fooling around? And that you're not taking this seriously, but eventually as a favor to what we were putting ourselves through, he added Samarkand, even though there was no one to visit there. I won't go through more. You can read about it, but one of the ways of dealing one of the ways of dealing with stress in any country, and certainly in our own lives, is humor. And you found that in spades in the Soviet Union. I mean, it's one of in Russia and related countries, it's one of the great countries in the world in technology and culture. And so the people figured out ways, humor among themselves that would not get them arrested. So I included some of these when we went to that motel years later. It reminded me of a joke of being a spy. Of being a spy. One of them, this is told both in English with a little Russian. A guy, G-U-Y, which is a favorite term for those who speak Russian and then into English. Many people are just called a guy. A guy, a favorite term used by English-speaking Russians, gets a job as a spy. He's sent on his first mission and told that the secret password he has to give to his contact is "the night bird flies at dawn." He's instructed to go to London, head to Piccadilly Circus. This sounds like an SFU type pilgrimage. Head to Piccadilly Circus and speak to a guy in a purple fedora busking. So he flies to London, goes to Piccadilly Circus, finds the busker with the purple fedora and says to him, "The night bird flies at dawn." The busker replies, "Right, mate. Now you need to go to Paris and talk to a guy sitting under the Eiffel Tower painting a picture of eggplants." So off to Paris he goes, down to the Eiffel Tower, and he sees someone sitting under it painting a picture of eggplants. "The night bird flies at dawn." "Oh, oui, the night bird. Next you must go to New York, Greenwich Village, 177A Bleecker Street, and speak to a man named Goldberg." He proceeds to New York, Greenwich Village, 177A Bleecker Street. He looks at the mailbox and sees Goldberg to B. He knocks on the door, and when someone answers it, he says, "The night bird flies at dawn." The guy, clearly annoyed, rolls his eyes and says, "No, you want Goldberg the spy. He's in 5C. Here's some more of the political satire that helped the Russians through. Freedom of speech. Question: what is the difference between the Constitution of the US and the USSR, at least the way it used to be, for both countries? After all, both of them guarantee freedom of speech. Answer: yes, but the Constitution of the USA also guarantees freedom after the speech. 5 precepts of the Soviet intelligentsia. Don't think. If you think, then don't speak. If you think and speak, then don't write. If you think, speak, and write, then don't sign. If you think, speak, write, and sign, then don't be surprised. Propaganda. Question: what should you do if a man you don't know takes a seat at your table in a pub and starts to sigh? Answer: immediately demand that he stops with the anti-Soviet propaganda. that there are many of this kind of humor. I'll just skip to the last one, and then there's some serious reflections about we were all spies and how our senses are always looking out. We might not call it spies, but where's my next meal? Or who am I going to be with? What am I going to wear? What's the weather? What's the politics? The sky is looking down on the earth, and one is responding to the other, and it goes again from the subatomic. I look at it in a universal sense, from the subatomic particle to the universe itself, which I write about in another chapter called Ouroboros. Ouroboros, some of you may know from mythology, is that image of the snake that is swallowing its own tail. Those who will be joining us for dinner after, we know there are herbivores and carnivores and omnivores, eat everything. And the Ouroboros, or the Ouroboros, is one that eats its own tail. It's the recycles both the creation, in a way, that which comes from the eating, which then gets reconstituted into another creation. It's the fullness of the universe as a cannibalistic organism that both gives birth and is resurrected in a constant choreography. So that's actually quite an interesting chapter. Then there's other chapters on the future of knowledge, education. There's poetry, observations. I'll just read to you just the short introduction to that. That's the series on different topics. Again, some are just one sentence and some a couple pages. So Joke Shop, with this man looking into the New Life Joke Shop, which is the name of the Chinese immigrant who had moved to Vancouver a few years before. And I see that shop as a metaphor for all life, and the man is us looking through the window. And then I take this chapter. Joke Shop is the world. Welcome to a confectionary, a philosophical variety store, a word emporium of observations on, and I'll just give you the titles: aging, art, books, charity, city, collecting, conflict, criticism, death, design, desire, gardens, genius, happiness, Holocaust, imperfection, knowledge, libraries, museums, peace, pilgrimage, poetry, presentations, psyche, psychogeography, quest, story, technology, war, and work. And in conclusion, there's a short parable attributed to Apollinaire in which he depicts a teacher in dialogue with his students. But it's not just a teacher of words on a page, but a teacher of life. And what I've learned there's a statement, the 2,000-year-old statement in Pirkei Avot, a rabbinic text, that says, Ezehu Chacham, who is considered wise, Halamed Mikol Adam, the person who learns from everyone else. I've edited that because I've over the centuries, I feel that it's become too anthropocentric. So you're wise to me, not just if you learn from another person, but if you learn from everything. from the winds and waters. There are, we're told, 70 languages and hundreds of senses and interpretations of any point in the world. So to open ourselves up to the acquired, the possible human, that this kind of wisdom, this to me is wisdom. So Apollinaire's parable, the teacher of life and the students, come to the edge, he said. We are afraid, they said. Come to the edge, he said. They came. He pushed them and they flew. Thank you.
Well, Yosef, that's a kind of an embarrassment of riches of wonderful ideas, provocations, thoughts, observations, and the book is full of so very many more. You began with the phrase, the joy of conversation and expression. And so I feel that's a good thing to return to in this wonderful cyclical image of the snake biting its own tail. Let's embark on a joyful conversation. You've expressed so much for us. Now it's our turn to ask you a few questions or add some of our own thoughts. I think Charles will be roving with his roving mic, if anybody would like to put their hand up and ask. But I might just take the prerogative of the fact that I've got the mic at the moment, just to ask you about the process of writing, because obviously that's something we are so sort of deeply interested in here. We had a conversation a few months back with a wonderful pianist, Sir Stephen Huff, who, like you, I think, is an enormously talented polymath, and he flies all over the world all the time, giving incredible piano recitals, playing concertos, playing solo concerts. And when he's got a quiet moment at an airport, he just jots down some thoughts or some poetry, or sometimes it might be a diary entry. And so it's these sort of little quiet moments in between amazing experiences and encounters and travels. And from that, he's written some wonderful books, which strike me as very, very similar to yours. These sort of compilations of thought and idea and germs of ideas and connections between other people's thinkings. And I just wondered, A, what the process is for you, whether it's similar to Stephen's, it's sort of always sort of picking ideas like fruit off a tree wherever you are, or whether you're conscious of whether you're writing in poetry or in something that feels like a diary or memoir or letters, because it's all of those, isn't it?
Ideally, I'd like to be like Stephen, and not to let a thought or feeling or insight what's the word when it seems so real, so all-encompassing at the moment of the inspiration or the epiphany. But let's say I'll be out in the garden or walking or driving or laying in bed, and it could happen anywhere if I just stop and take the time. But it is like a whole ecosystem of consciousness, and so that means that the shadow is also very strong, and it seduces me into saying, oh, that feels or is quite the thought. And I've learned now to enjoy it at the moment. But then if I don't, within a few minutes, write it down or record it somehow, it evaporates. There's times with great effort, I'll make myself, get up again and write it down. Or take that picture, but it's a conversation that I had with some friends just recently. Let's say you're having an experience, an aesthetic or a spiritual or personal, whatever the experience is, but it feels important. Do you need, is that enough? The integrity of that, or do you need to record it? And if you don't take that photograph or write that score, or some note to remind you, is that wrong? Or have you violated that? I'll call it. It's very intimate moment when you have that. I mean, in some ways, I don't like to speak about it because it's so private. And when I do start to write, there are times when I'll have some information to remind me. At other times, I remember reading, but I forget who it was. I think it was a woman writer who said, "I don't know what I'm thinking until I write it." Probably a lot of have had that experience, and so I've tried. I mean, I still get angry and upset and impatient, and but I try as much as possible to live as many times during the day, kind of like, check your posture, how's your breathing, and the same with thought, and try to make those corrections. So what's the integrity of the moment? And then when I do sit down to write, it pours through. Well, one of the most difficult things I've found with writing that I guess Alan has helped me through some of that is the editing. I used to think that I wrote it, that's perfect, that's just right. Now let's get on with other things. And I'm usually happy with the editing. But it's quite often a painful process.
Thank you. Now, there's a question, or there's Julie, would you like to start us?
Well, thank you for a fascinating evening already. You're quite evidently a citizen of the world and you travel all over the place. When you're not seeking new love or being a spy, could you tell us what it is? How do you choose your next destination and what it is? What is it that you're seeking?
Thank you. I used to have quite a long list of things that ideally I either wanted to be or do or become. That list has gotten shorter with age. Part of it is just the reality of aging, and I just can't do that anymore. On the other hand, I find that each age has its own revelations, and so there. Here, let's on sexuality. So that you said maybe for most of us, it's something that would occupy It's part of the biological imperative, and it's captured us from at a certain age through. But I found that evolves over time, and I remember speaking with a friend. Some of you may know in Vancouver, the architect Loy Leyland. His father was a psychiatrist, and I was speaking with Loy about this. And he told me his father came home from the office one day and said, "What a relief." And Loy asked him, "What?" And he said, "To get the monkey off my back." That just that constant. I mean, the sexuality is with us until we die, but it can control so much of our thought and our actions and our time. And at a certain age, some of that, the monkey or the lemurs, where I just came from, are off your back, and they're back on the tree, and their life goes on, and there's still beauty in the world. And there are times when I wish I had that strength, or to be an Olympic athlete, or win a Nobel Prize, or to whatever it is for humanity. And in the Torah, it talks about that we're created B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God. And what does that mean? One of my great teachers was Thomas Berry, Berry. He was a Catholic theologian, and he spoke about that humanity is the earth made conscious. We are the earth made conscious of itself. And then you extend that, we are the universe made conscious of itself. I mean, everything has a type of consciousness, whether it's a rock or this or that. And there are different forces that come together and dissipate. It's a whole choreography going on constantly. And yet to say that we are the consciousness of the universe made conscious of itself. And then the last few years, when you say, what do I decide to do? Like, so I don't believe anymore. I don't have patience for belief. I want to know. And so I've become more of an iconoclast than a believer, and with some respect still, but I want to smash all these images of God or Orthodox thought, or here in the university, and where it talks. And I want that encounter kind of like Moses at the burning bush, or whoever we are. But the greatest conversations are not with theologians, but with atheists. Whoa, take away all that belief and all that practice, and do this and do that. And that's good at times, and maybe for a community it works. But when you only have a few years left, and you want to dedicate your life to clarity, I can see God, if there is, or a goddess, or maybe it's just what it is or isn't. And I've realized it's beyond words. So you say, do I take notes, and do I then put that in? I want to just words like vision. You can only see to the end of the row here, but then you've got television and telescopes, and then extraplanetary telescopes, and so or the same. So your vision is limited. Any sense, it can only hear so much. You can only think so much. Words are a vehicle. They'll only take you so far. And in the true I'll just use the word mystic, but it doesn't have to be. You can get caught up in that mind. And then you need to get rid of the damn mind because it's also trapping you. And it's not enough to have an I-thou relationship, which is pretty good. It's not an I-it, subject, object, but it's two subjects, but it's still a duality. So get rid of that and just be totally present with so that's where I want to spend my time. And it's no longer a series of what I want to become or do or go or be. It's just pulling the veil away.
That's an extraordinarily rich answer. And of course, you know, we are a centre that deals with words. We write lives, we think about lives, and we usually translate that into language. You've thought about books, you've celebrated the materiality of books, and you've written a book, but you do go beyond words. And we've had a whole series of events called Beyond Words here at the Life Writing Centre, and that is something really exciting for us, this sense that there is something numinous that can't be pinned down by language. And perhaps this fragmentary way of writing is a way of gesturing to the spaces between the thoughts.
And you have that in music.
Absolutely do. I wonder, much as we would love this to go on and on, whether we ought to perhaps just move further back in the room, all stay together, have canapes and wine, and talk to you more informally. How would that be? But a couple more questions first. Okay, fantastic. Yes, there's one just there.
I'm looking forward to reading your book, Rabbi Yosef. Can I take you back to Samarkand? You didn't see or didn't find Jewish presence there, but there's quite a bit of history, Jewish history in that part of the world. Next to one of the most illustrious Muslim cemetery, which is called Shah Zinda, and that's where Prophet's cousin is buried. Next to it is a huge Jewish cemetery in Samarkand. And the connection with China, with India, with Persia. And for the last, in Bukhara, I used to have chats with local rabbi.
Wow.
And so there is a Jewish community. And he told me that the biggest cemetery was not in Samarkand, but it was in Bukhara. And but he also told me about Bukhara. The language which the Jewish people spoke. So what I'm saying is that there is quite a bit of history on the Silk Road, and since you mentioned Samarkand, so it sort of came back to me.
Thank you. A good friend of mine in Vancouver, his name is Shlomo Yakutieli. He was born in Herat, H-E-R-A-T, Afghanistan. And then he and his family escaped and moved to Israel about probably in the early 60s or late 50s, and then lived in Israel for many years, and then had been in Vancouver now for 40, 50 years. And he still remembers fondly many stories about Afghanistan. I was speaking with him about the Silk Route at one time, and I write about more about the Silk Route. There's actually will be the trilogy. There's a spoiler alert, right? That the third volume of this, so the first two there, and the third one is more about travels and the idea of why we travel. So he once told me that Jewish settlements along the ancient Silk Route were every 6 days of travel apart, meaning how far you could walk or donkey or camel from one town to the other, because on Friday, at the latest, like on Friday afternoon, you need to be settled in because the Sabbath is going to start in a few hours at sunset. So if you look on a map of the ancient Silk Route, you'll see a Jewish settlement every 6 days apart. Yeah.
There's a, Tana, was there a question? Or yes. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm really curious about what you said about non-belief. And I'd like to know, is this a recent sort of thought of yours, or is this, how do you come to a place of, or is this just an intellectual challenge of not believing what you read, what you learn? Yeah, I'm just curious about what you mean about that.
Yeah, thank you. And I know we could have a much longer conversation, so hopefully someday. No, it's not an intellectual exercise, or it's not a belief in non-belief. It feels and one of the words that come to me is being a friend. I know it's used in Sufi literature too, where God sometimes is known as the friend. And I feel that more now vis-a-vis the deity. At the same time, being very careful, because you can get burned badly until death many times over, because there's the in traditional rabbinic literature, they talk about in terms of dualities, but there's ahava and yira, love and fear, and the two of them are balanced. And if you only have love, I'll tell you a story, okay? So there was an argument in the academy, so this is appropriate. This took place in Babylon, in the Talmudic Academy about 2,000 years ago, and they were discussing a point of halacha, that means of Jewish law. And what usually happens is that they would spend weeks, sometimes months, like in a parliament, discussing the different ideas and quoting and reasoning. They finally voted and decided on what the law would be. One rabbi, however, he said, I'm not accepting that. It cannot be. And he said, if I am right, let the walls of the schoolhouse, the Beit HaMidrash, fall in upon us. And the walls of the schoolhouse of Wilson College started falling in among the scholars, to which the leader of the opposition or of the majority stood up and rebuked the walls and said, what have you to do with an argument among the scholars? At which point the walls stopped coming in, but in deference to the first rabbi, they remained halfway. He said, if I am right, and he pointed out the window, let the carob tree prove it to me. And a large carob tree was immediately uprooted from its place and flew 100 yards down, to which the other rabbis stood and said, you cannot bring proof to a halachic conversation from a flying carob tree. He stood up and he said, if I am right, let the river, the Charwell, stop where it's flowing and flow back upstream, to which the river stopped and started flowing back upstream. To which the other rabbi stood and said, you cannot bring proof from a backward flowing river. later, we're told the next generation of the people heard this was such an incredible series of events. And one particular rabbi who was a mystic, and he would have conversations with the incarnation of Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet. So this was the Elijah had died centuries before, but he came back as a teacher and appeared as to people. So this rabbi was speaking with Elijah the prophet, and he said, when God was looked down from heaven and he saw what was going on, what was his reaction? And Elijah said, God laughed and said, Nitzchuni banai, nitzchuni, my children have defeated me, my children have defeated me. And then they quote something that says, once the Torah, the teaching was given at Sinai, Lo b'shamayim, it's no longer in heaven. It's now we as humans must take responsibility. It's like that idea of a co-creation. It's not just being put in the garden and expecting all goodness to come, but you have to cultivate it, but also guard it. You have to, the idea of accepting the revelation, but also you're responsible in how it's applied in everyday life. So I do live in a duality of being practical, but in my don't tell anyone outside this room, but of being practical because it's necessary, but also having very private moments when nothing matters. I would be, and there is a discussion, something like this in the Talmud. Would it have, the rabbis discussed, would it have been better if there had been no creation? Why did you need to bring creation? You're already perfect. There's no duality. There's no hunger or pain, confusion, death, desire. Why did you bring that into being? And there are a number of answers that we attempt to bring. Would it have been better to have creation or not creation? And this time it took them a year and a half, like there were 3 semesters or so. And finally they brought it to a vote. And it was the only time I've seen when it was a real compromise conclusion. And surprisingly, because the rabbis of the Talmud were often more radical than we are today. And they said, it would have been better if there was no creation. But since there is, we should look to our deeds. It uses the example of like a textile, like you feel the textile, you feel the texture of the world and react in a responsible way towards it. So I feel most comfortable in a place. I mentioned that metaphor of the parentheses. Jean Houston, who I also mentioned, she described us as the people of the parentheses. And I think of a time before creation and after creation. And it could be billions or trillions or however long eternity is, but just to me there was something before and there will be after, and that's where I feel most comfortable.
And I think we have had so much before, and now after there is wine and canapes and books. Yosef, thank you so very, very, very much. And this conversation is not at an end, it continues. Please feel free to stay for as long as you like and hopefully pick up on some of these extraordinary themes. Thank you so very much indeed.